Fáilte and welcome to another Friday Reflections. I'm Rob Smith, also known as Jazz Smudson. Àrd-dhruidh is àrd-ollamh na Tuatha, the Arch-druid and Chief Doctor of Art of the tribe. We're continuing to improve the website and have introduced a new page on Celtic recipes, including bannocks for each of the great or fire festivals. There's also a new page called Paganism by Numbers, which gives a list of various items by number, such as the 3 gods of surety, the 6 types of knowledge, the 9 dulia, etc. Please have a look, and I'd urge you to join the website. The address can be found attached to this post. You may notice that my àrd-dhruidh, or shrine, behind me is covered. This is because we are currently in the dark of the moon. The dark is the last 3 days of the lunar month, when the moon is almost entirely black in the night sky. It was considered the most dangerous and unfortunate time of the month, when the forces of chaos, entropy, disease and misfortune are at the strongest. Boats would try to be in the harbour. People didn't go out after sunset. Crops and animals wouldn't be culled as their Dearg, substance, was at the lowest ebb, losing taste. Wood wouldn't be collected or cut because it became brittle at this time. People refrained from cutting hair or nails in case they were used to àrd-dhruidh or for cursing. As a result, I don't do any dearg or rituals except to say 3 prayers of blessing and protection each evening and morning. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you about Bealltuinn. Bealltuinn marks the start of the second meadow, the light half of the year, also known as summer. The name of the festival comes from the Gaelic words Beall and Tuinn. Tuinn is the archaic plural and genitive of Chenia, meaning fire. Beall is an archaic word for death and for a smokeless and flameless fire. That is a fire that had burnt down to the embers. It comes from the Proto-Celtic Bealltuinne, meaning death's fire. There are some who argue it means bright fire, but this doesn't quite work in Gaelic. The Gaelic for bright is geall, and as it's an adjective, it would lenate the following consonant, so it'd be geallhín, not Bealltuinn. One argument for bright fire is that Bealltuinn is a festival that celebrates life and growth, so it wouldn't be dedicated to a god of death. But this ignores religious paradox, the epigraphy we have about the festival, and some of the customs at this time of year. Cormac's Glossary, written in the 6th century, and Keating's History of Ireland, as well as the Carmina Gadelica written 1300 years later, all agree with the orthodox interpretation, that the festival was named for Beall. Unfortunately, during the Celtic revival, attempts were made to conflate Beall with the Phoenician Baal or Bel and the continental Belinos. Although these interpretations don't fit, they have persisted. The principal myth of the festival is the taking of Ireland by the Tuatha, the gods. According to Lebel Gabala Erin, the Tuatha had been studying occult law in the cities of the north for 7 years. Before they arrived, the king of the Fir Bolg had a vision of black birds covering the island. His druids explain that this is a vision of the coming of a great enemy who will bring death and destruction. Indeed, 6 weeks after Bealltuinn is the first battle of Moyturret, which does indeed bring death and destruction to the Fir Bolg. But I'll talk more about that in future reflections. The myth ties in with the tradition of beating or riding the bounds, which took place throughout the British Isles in May. This was a ceremony where the people of a town or parish marked the boundaries of their settlement for the coming year. Ronald Hutton describes such processions in Stations of the Sun. By late medieval period, they had become raucous affairs with music, dancing, and led by banners often depicting a dragon. The dragon represents the evil that people were trying to drive out. The ceremony was a practical way of showing people who had authority and sovereignty, but also dislodging animals that had taken up residence during the winter. Spiritually, it was a way of cleansing an area of evil. When the Tuatha arrive, they come in dark clouds. that covers Ireland for 3 nights and 3 days, or in the Christianized version, they arrive by boat and then burn them, covering the island in darkness. The second major myth comes from the Aonghas of Meath. A druid called Meath lights a mystical fire which burns for 7 years and, quote, sheds its fierceness over the 4 corners of Ireland, unquote, i.e. every district of Ireland was subordinate to it. It was a, quote, sure truce, unquote, i.e. Bealltuinn was a time when war and raiding was forbidden. The other druids object to the fire, so Meath cuts out their tongues, buries them under Uisneach, and sits him down over them. This is why the Assembly of Uisneach had primacy over all the druids and Fili of Ireland, and why Uisneach was a druidic assembly, not an assembly of kings. Again, the myth gives the justification for the fires of Baal. The major event at this time during the Iron Age and the early medieval period was the Transhumance. This was the movement of flocks and herds to summer pasture. This tradition continued in the outlying islands of Ireland and in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland through to the clearances and the Industrial Revolution. The Comuna Gadelica gives a vivid description of àrd-dhruidh, the procession. People would be in their Sunday best. There was excited cheers and whoops, and boys and girls would call out and tease each other. There was a strict order. First cattle, then sheep, then goats, then horses, and finally people on foot. When they reached the summer grazing grounds, they would seize their animals, and then they would build a bonfire from the 9 sacred woods. This was the only time of year when it was permitted to cut or burn hawthorn. The rest of the year it was forbidden. Hawthorn blossoms in May, which is one way you can tell it's Bealltuinn. The fire would be a tain aigen, or need fire, a fire lit by rubbing 2 pieces of wood together or by grazing the stones of the mountain, using a flint. Once the first fire was alight, they would build a second fire from sacred woods and light it from the first. There would be enough distance between the two to allow the flocks and herds to pass through. The animals and then humans would pass between the 2 fires for purification and blessing. There is an old saying in the Highlands, Budoragomsa shin a gianov gut na dol etter da haine vor veil. It would be worse for me to do that than pass between the 2 great fires of Baal, i.e. I'd rather chop my hand off than do that. It was said that if a person with evil intent would not be blessed, but cursed if he went through the fires. Once the animals and everyone had gone through, the people would have a feast. Unlike Samhain, when the necessities of life, food, drink, fire, water and shelter were shared, Bealltuinn was a time when families would feast on their own, because sharing the necessities could allow them to be used for Dearg. Each family would make a bannock Bealltuinn, or Bealltuinn bannock. The bannock is different to the other festival bannocks by having 8 balls on top. After the feast, the feartaire, or man of the household, would pick off a ball. Sitting with his back to the fire, he would throw a ball over his shoulder into it. The first and last were done silently, as death is the great silencer. For the rest he would say, "Here's to you, wolf, spare my sheep. Here's to you, fox, spare my lambs. Here's to you, eagle, spare my goats. Here's to you, raven, spare my kids. Here's to you, marten, spare my fowls. Here's to you, harrier, spare my chickens." Alexander Carmichael in the Comuna notes the Bealltuinn feast was of lamb, quote, "which is now eaten, but was formerly sacrificed," unquote. A lamb was offered as a thanksgiving for lambing at Imbolc, whereas it was offered at the autumn equinox in hope of a good lambing to come. The autumn equinox is 5 months before Imbolc, which is the gestation period of sheep. In Ireland, flowers were offered by young girls at the stricken on Knockferrin to Down, the lord of the dead. Boyne is not just the god of the dead, but also of cattle, fertility, storms, truth, justice, the arts, music, and bladed battle weapons, such as pikes, spears, javelins, and scythes. The offering was made so that he would, quote, not rip up the young shoots, unquote. As you can see, death features quite heavily in the myths and traditions. Another reason may be that the period from Bealltuinn to Sain was the time for war and cattle raiding. The Fianna, the militia of young warriors, were billeted on the population between Sain and Bealltuinn to keep the king's peace. But from Bealltuinn to Sain, they were expected to live off the land by hunting and raiding. In the Bronze Age, Bealltuinn was marked by the heliacal rise of the Pleiades in the constellation of Taurus. For the ancient Gaels, they may have represented the battle goddesses, Beibh, Macha, Anna, Avorigin, Nevin, and Fea, or the 7 kings of Ireland, the High King, kings of the 5 provinces, and the king of the Fianna. Bealltuinn is not just about death and protection. It is also a celebration of life and growth. At this time of year, birds are singing, flowers are blooming, animals are either mating or getting ready to mate. In Scotland, it was often called La Bua Bealltuinn, the yellow day of Bealltuinn, as so many yellow flowers were around. In particular, it is the festival of fire in water. This is an Indo-European concept that water carries the life force or energy, bri, that allows plants, humans, and animals to grow, mature, and reproduce. At sunrise and sunset, the sun can appear to send a beam of light across the sea into the land. When the sun shines on water, it seems to sparkle. Myths that reflect this may be the origin myths of the Boyne and the Shannon. The goddess Boyne decides to visit the well of Segesh at the foot of Carberry Hill to obtain occult knowledge. The well was surrounded by hazel trees. When the hazelnuts drop into the pool, they are eaten by the salmon of wisdom. Only Noaha, or Necton, and his 3 cupbearers were allowed near the pool. When Boyne approaches the well, it is affronted by her presence and rises up against her. It chases her from the well to the sea, creating the river Boyne. There it overwhelms her. She is killed and loses an arm, a leg, and an eye. There is a similar myth for the creation of the Shannon and the goddess Shannon. Many rivers and lakes are created by water overflowing from a well or spring, such as the Shulin, Loch Ness, Loch Ness, Loch Ree, amongst others. Water can be placid and calm, but it can also be swift, raging, or tempestuous and dangerous. However, as every gardener and farmer will tell you, there is no growth without water, but there's also no growth with too much water. One tradition at Bealltuinn was bathing your face in the dew on the morning, which was said to restore health and beauty. Another was visiting holy wells and springs, as the first draught of water on Bealltuinn was considered specially potent in restoring and maintaining health. Another aspect of Bealltuinn which ties together protection and sacred wells was the patterns at Crobh, City of the Red Claw. Crobh is the malevolent form of Anna or Anu, the mother of the Irish gods. The city is a Neolithic structure directly in line of sight of the Paps of Anu. It was tradition to bring cattle there to drink from the sacred well at Bealltuinn. Pilgrims would go round the city performing prayers at various points, known as a pattern, for protection and blessing. Crobh was euhemerized as a saint by the Catholic Church. She had 4 sisters or daughters, all of whom were euhemerized as saints, and each were honoured near the 4 great festivals: Govnat near Imabolc, Innimbui near Bealltuinn, Lachuran near Lunasa, and Anna at Sain. Innimbui means daughter of Bui. According to the parish of Drumtrarif, Inviolate was a goddess who was worshipped in the area. Drumtarif means Ridge of the Bull. The parish is quite clear that a bull calf was sacrificed on the ridge, and that local families called Leahy were charged with looking after the calf until Bealltuinn. The final aspect of Bealltuinn is love. Bees do it, birds do it, even educated fleas do it. This time of year, lambs are frolicking after being born at Imabog. Calves are running around after being born in March and April. Birds are nesting and laying eggs and rearing chicks. Insects are on the wing taking advantage of the abundance of flowers. So it's no surprise that human thoughts turn to love as well. Aonghas Og, the god of youth, sends out his, quote, strange inviolate birds forever on the wing, unquote, that brings lovers together. The 4 birds are called Toha and Tiaku and Tiaku. The names mean come and go. The Toha were male, and the Tiagu female. Although courting was part and parcel of the Bealltuinn festivities, marriage was not. It's said that anyone who weds at Bealltuinn will have a short or disastrous marriage. Like all the great festivals, Bealltuinn has a number of aspects, not just one. I hope you've enjoyed this evening's reflections. The calendar and the festivals are something we deal with in much greater detail in our fostering course. If you would like to enrol, please contact me at the email addresses attached to this post. Until next time, Joe Hechken, agus Bianach Vriana leave. Have a great week, and may the blessings of the gods go with you.